First Things First is sponsored by Gillette, the best a man can get.
Back here, First Things First, Sports Illustrated senior writer Chris Mannix joins
What up,
party.
What's up, man? Brother. Good to be back.
We love having you here. All right, should have been a rough weekend for the Houston Rockets. They had to face the Warriors.
I'll see about a bunch of other stuff.
in Golden State without an injured James Harden. But they did have Chris Paul, and as a result, the Rockets did beat Golden State 118-112. It was a vintage CP3 performance, 23 points, 17 assists, and he passed the 9,000 assist mark. Chris Mannix, how far can this Rockets team go if they have this version of Chris Paul?
This version of Chris Paul is great with James Harden out, just like James Harden without Chris Paul out was great. But the reason the Rockets have half a chance of getting past Golden State has nothing to do with Chris Paul or James Harden. It's the guys they picked up over the last month.
Ooh, yes.
The deals, the offseason for the Rockets wasn't very good. Like, they let go of a couple of guys, Trevor Ariza, Luke Mbah-a-Moute. We can debate how much Mbah-a-Moute was actually worth to that team. But they were in some trouble prior to the buyout period when they grabbed Kenneth Faried and they grabbed Austin Rivers. I don't think I've seen a reclamation project like Kenneth Faried in the last couple of months. Kenneth Faried, he's averaging 16 points and 10 rebounds with the Rockets. Austin Rivers comes out of nowhere with let go with Washington. He's giving you 10 points in 33 minutes per game. Where would this team be without those two players? They wouldn't be in this position right now. So I think Chris Paul and James Harden are playing at this level and can continue to play at this level. The question about beating Golden State comes down to, can Faried, Rivers, and the rest of that supporting cast play at the same level the supporting cast last year did?
And that's why when I lived in Houston and once the trade deadline, or I'm sorry, in the offseason, once free agency would happen, we would do an annual radio interview with Daryl Morey. And he would always say, the number one thing NBA fans mistake is that your team on November 1st, this was back when the season started about November 1st, is not the team you're going to go into the playoffs with. And one of the reasons the Rockets have always been cautious about using their full mid-level exception, if we're going to use really nerdy terms, is because they want to save a little extra money. So when the buyout market happens, they're not just offering the minimum. They can offer a little more than other teams, and they keep a roster spot open for when, oh my goodness, we need Austin Rivers. Kenneth Faried's available. They would have been a spot potentially for DeAndre Jordan had he been bought out. So now all of a sudden, the Rockets look like, okay, they have their rotation. CP3, Harden, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, Clint Capella. That's the starting five from last year. But now a front court backups of Kenneth Faried and Nene with a backcourt backups of Austin Rivers and Gerald Green. You're only going to play 9 guys against Golden State at most. You trust all of those guys. And so now you're seeing who they actually can be. And the most important thing to me, though, is, of course, if Chris Paul stays healthy. Because we know that, to steal a line from Draymond Green, there are 82-game players and there are 16-game players, meaning guys that can do it in the postseason. I don't care about Chris Paul's postseason lack of team success. We know in the postseason he can be an extraordinary player as long as he's out there on the court.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a couple different areas. Number one, to your point, they got a great culture for an offensive player there in Houston. Austin Rivers, I saw in the game, they isolated him 3 times in a row. I was like, when's the last time? That was high school? When was the last time he got isolated 3 times in a row, 2 times able to make very, very efficient plays, 1 time scoring the ball, 1 time helping his teammates. Faried, what he's doing, bringing the 5 out to the shooting the 3-pointer, playing with energy. And then one of the things that we don't see that often in the league, this team plays together. So that culture that they have there, the effect the head coach has on the players offensively, but once you come into that building, because he told us, they don't practice a lot. But guys like being there. They like being on the team. And you can see it playing off on the back end of this roster. So for me, it's not about Chris Paul and what he did. Because you know what they did? They ran the same sets that they ran for James Harden. They ran a double high pick and roll and let Chris Paul work. And if you helped into the lane, he dished it outside. So he had control of the game the way Harden did. So I believe that that is duplicatable. But these other players and the roles that they're playing and team-wise, playing together in this NBA, as you guys know, it means an awful lot coming down the stretch.
But the last time I think you were on, Maddox, we talked about how sustainable this is for James Harden. If he's going to have to do it, if he can do it, isn't it at least a little pressure off him knowing he doesn't have to do it every night?
Enormous amount of pressure. When I was down in Houston a few weeks back, I was talking to their coach. I said, you know, what do you think of all this? Like, we got to get help. Like, you know, it's awesome to watch all this happening, but they know a couple of years ago when they flamed out against San Antonio in the second round, that was largely because I think James played all 82 that year, and he was just exhausted when he went up against a top-tier defensive team, and he had to deal with everything all by himself. So having Chris Paul playing at this level is incredible for them. But on the flip side of it, if you look at Golden State, they might have a looming DeMarcus Cousins problem. Like, DeMarcus Cousins with that team, offensively, he's fine, even though, strangely enough, they're 6 points better offensively with DeMarcus off the floor. But defensively, you watched that game last night and watch every game that DeMarcus Cousins is
Pick and roll him to death.
Pick and rolling him to death. That's a problem for this team because, like, everybody's going to do that. And you can say, well, just take him off the floor. But DeMarcus already has had some kind of grumbles already. He's already kind of said, he's already been like, you know, I don't know if I like this.
He's not playing in crunch.
Right, but which is a little bit surprising because he should have known coming in that this was the deal. Like, this was the story with DeMarcus Cousins. You knew you were coming into a ready-made championship contender. You were coming in there to rehab your body and rehab your image. And if he starts grumbling, the ladder's not going to work.
I think you're doing a great job making the point of Golden State. Watch out. There might be some rumblings because now that they've removed the restriction minutes, because it made sense him not playing to end the games before because he was on the restricted minutes. Now they've removed that. Just listen to his interviews. He's had a couple little spicy little interviews, and seeing these competitive games and you're not on the court, because it doesn't only mean something for this year's team. It means more of him going to free agency. Do we make him a max guy? And these guys are selfish about their money, so that's something to watch. Great point by you. Something to watch coming down the stretch.
I'm serious about Kenneth Faried, too. If I have a most improved player vote, he should get most improved player for half a season. Like, he was stapled to the bench in Brooklyn and has done nothing for the last couple of years. But
it's not like there's some horrible story in Brooklyn. No, they're developing their players. They're winning. They're in playoff form.
He has been a godsend for that Rockets team.
The least improved player I'd give to Jaylen Brown, but we can talk about it later. On the Rockets Warriors, just real quick. Over the last 2 years, the Rockets are 8-5 against them. 8-5. That includes regular season, postseason. They're 3-0 against them this year in the regular season. The Warriors are 1 game up on Denver. It's not like these Warriors don't care. The Warriors want home court advantage.
Engaged.
They saw last year, not having home court advantage, how much that could hurt you by the time you get to the conference finals, once you have to go through the gauntlet of the Western Conference playoffs. Like, there is an element of the Rockets, and since the Warriors have had Kevin Durant, they have rolled over everyone, including LeBron's Cavs, except for the Houston Rockets in that series last year, except for the Houston Rockets in the regular season. The Rockets won 3 in a row in the regular season. Like, even if you remove the playoffs, they have a winning record against Golden State. There is something there. And to do it without the last one they won was without Chris Paul, the overtime when James Harden hit the 3. This one to do it without James Harden, there's something to be said for that. And the DeMarcus Cousins point is something definitely to watch because they will run a high pick and roll every play he's on the court and force him off the court.
Every single time.
All right, Chris, we'll see you a little bit later on the show. Got to take a break.
Oh, you want to talk Jaylen Brown? Is that what you want to do?
Coming up, can Kyler Murray assert himself as the #1 quarterback in the draft with a strong combine? Next on First Things First.
People might not be around to see our Celtics segment later, so I just want to make sure I got it in now.
Yes.
Just to be